The South African Cross Country Championship Racing action is proudly brought to you by Pepson Plastics in association with Yamaha, KTM, and Husqvarna Motorcycles. Virginia Trails, our host venue for the doubleheader round to close out on what has been an incredibly compacted and tight 4 rounds of the 2020 South African Cross Country National Championship Series. Virginia Trails was going to give us our champions for the series. We've already had the mountains of Lesotho, then the lowlands of Gauteng for Rhino Park, and here over 2 days of hot, dry and dusty racing, we were going to be able to draw a line under this incredible season. The story of the championship coming into this round was a lot of tie-ups on the points. So day number 1 was going to decide who was going to lead into the final round. A lot of regional riders came into play, which meant it was going to be busy out on the track. As always, the juniors joined us as well. And on the season, Kobus Bester and Sabrant have been strong. Brandon Clark and Jake the Snake Pretorius always looking good in the 85s and the 65s. But here at KZN, they had a couple of locals to play with as well. For the seniors, though, we caught up with some stories. In the OR1 Big Bangers, 2 red plates tied on championship points. We caught up with them both. First, Charon.
Yeah, look, super exciting. I think it makes for some good racing, some good battles, and it's going to be an interesting weekend, to say the least, between myself and Kenny.
Kenny had his own opinion on it as well. We chatted to the former champ.
Yeah, very interesting. You know, this year there was only 4 rounds for the championship. First one was in Lesotho. Charon won that race, and then I won the one in Rhino Park in Gauteng. So now we're here in Natal doing the double header. So yeah, I'm just ready to get going. I'm excited to get some racing done and then hopefully come away with the championship. But you know, we're both been fighting hard for it, and yeah, I'd let the best man win.
It was a similar story on the other side of the coin for the OR2s as well. Jazz tells us the story.
Yeah, myself and Brett Swanepoel are tied on points for the championship, so a little bit of rivalry going on this weekend. But it's also a big weekend. We got it racing today, racing tomorrow as well, same route. So it's going to be a challenge. But I'm up for it and I'm excited. And yeah, I'm rearing to go to get out there and go and ride my bike.
Red plate on the top for Brett Swanepoel as well, and he will like it down here in KZN.
I think it's going to be a really tough weekend racing this weekend. Jad's a fierce competitor and we neck on neck. So yeah, I definitely think I've got a bit of one up here coming to my home ground. So yeah, hopefully that plays a bit into my favour, but just hoping for a good day, solid riding and just having fun out there.
The Virginia Trails was going to be an incredible venue. It already is. If you guys are down there, go and check out the mountain bike trails. They are phenomenal. This time around, though, they were going to be used for a little bit more than leg power. Horsepower was the order of the weekend. Dust Bowl racing, that rain that was so sorely needed a couple of days coming up to the event, just never materialized, but the heat did. It was going to be in the high 30s, so hydration and shade in the early part was going to be key for all the riders who were desperate for those last crumbs of championship points. A couple of the guys were so close to being able to wrap up their championships with 1 round to go. The KZN Off-Road Club and the committee had done a great job. Pepper had nothing but good things to say.
As part of the commission, we're stoked at what Natal, KZN have put together here. Deanne, Karen, their whole team, Mr. Cox, all of them. I mean, they've so far, I haven't been out there, so I can't tell you, but I don't think you get bad riding in Natal, and what's here in the pits and that, they've put something awesome together for 2 days.
Coming out of the time trial, no big surprise to see Brett Swanepoel at the top of the charts. He would have clear air. The big surprise, though, was the superstar of hard enduro, Goodsight, having a good run. He was going to go out of the gate in second place, chasing into the dust of Swanepoel. Remember, he does have a background from juniors in riding flat out, but was he going to be able to be a spoiler? Cox was going to do the chase down. He qualified fastest of the little bikes in the 250s and fastest of the big bikes in the OR1s was Charon. This was going to be a story, though. Dav Cocker, could he upset the apple cart? He would have to win both rounds, and then missing from round number 2, but back into it this time around. Coley was going to be a mixer, as well as local superstar Calvin Hume. Everyone desperate to get day number 1 out of the way and start relaxing before day number 2. In the queue, though, everyone waited for their marching orders. Join us after the break, though, as we go out onto the Virginia trails. Welcome back. We cover our action from the final 2 rounds of the National Cross Country Championship Racing Series down here in KZN, the Virginia Trails, and on board with Lee Thompson showing us how tight things are in the sugarcanes. The regional warriors were out in force. They went out in batches of 3, and it was straight out elbows up racing from the gate drop as they went out on the exact same track as the national superstars as well. Into the first of the gnarly wooded sections, and Brett Swanepoel had clear air and was running off the front. It was so important for him at this stage to have gotten that whole shot and be topping the charts coming out of the prologue. It meant everyone else was chasing into the dust. He was happy to lead off the front, making some nice early passes. Brad Cox had got through on Goodsight. Goodsight had crashed in the early stages and was not going to be a show-up for the rest of the day. Charon Moore was now up into third and first of the big bangers in the OR1s, putting light between himself and his championship rival, Kenny Gilbert. Dav Cocker was on his wheel as well as second of the little bikes in the 250s, trying to close in on a top run in the overalls. The Forest giving us a real good highlight of the skills and a nice mix as well. Calvin Hume showing us what it's all about. The Blue Crew trying to stay out of the mud. And in the lowland section, no one wanted to go for a bath, even though the temperatures were high. I'm pretty sure they would have liked that a little bit later on when racing was wrapped up. For Coley, an early crash showed that he had to straighten up his bars before he carried on into the mix. He was still running high in the top 3s for the OR2 category. Brad Cox was ripping up the fields at this stage, though, and starting to close in on the overalls. Jared Katsir was good, but not as good as we've seen him in the past. Something was missing from the man that was joint points leader in the OR2's red plate style. The open terrain here showed what the bikes could really do, and what a layout they were treated to. Some of the best riding in the world. Everyone had been looking forward to this, and in a way, they didn't want to race it. They just wanted to ride this awesome terrain, world class, as we saw them popping up and out as if they were racing out in the mountains of Austria. Kenny Gilbert was there, but he was in second place on the big bikes and could not close in on the back wheel of Charon Moore in the early running. The man that's in the fight for third place in the OR3s, Ryan Peltzer, was doing a good job to hold his station and stay ahead of JC Nienaber. Nienaber was in a two-way fight for third place in the big bangers between himself and Veinard Delport. Calvin Hume was slowly building pace, getting himself used to where he was lined up, and himself and Coley were going to be robbing points from some key players, namely Taki Bodgiorgis. He was in a fight for third place in the OR2 for the championship. Back on board, you can see how gnarly things are. This was actual technical climb. A lot of rocks and a lot of loose dirt as well, just skirting on the edge of the forest section. A little bit more enduro than a lot of these cross-country wide-open players are used to. Coming up on the back wheel of Pepper. Pepper got caught out on the climbs at round number 1 in the mountains of Lesotho. He also got caught out on the rocks here. His teammate and stablemate, Thompson, giving him some words of encouragement. Eric Merry had looked good in the second half of this season and was also trying to challenge his way inside of a top 3 for the OR3s. Ian Rawle, who has been amazing on the regional front, was once again on the back foot as far as the nationals go. He was trying to break his way, though, inside of a top 10. Gilbert showing us how it's done in style all the way on the back wheel of the big Husky 450 up the hills. Round number 1 winner from the mountains, Dylan Cox in the high school 125s was doing a great job, but the momentum in that championship was in the hands of Matty Wilson. Cole was still there in the mix, and he was trying to see what he could do as far as the OR2 championship goes. Brawl needed to get a move on and try and make some passes on the local superstars. Wilson was building his way up the order, at this stage still on the back foot, behind Dylan Cox, but eventually he would close in and start making the pass. That was Vaynard Delport in that two-way dice for third place in the championship for the Big Bangers between himself and JC Nienaber, and Taki was trying to grab all those points on the plate. The man that is unbeaten on the championship tour so far in 2020 was Wade Blau for the seniors as he tried to stay ahead of the rest of the field. There was really no one to match his pace. Carl McKenzie had a big ouchie going across, just lost his handlebar going into one of the drop-offs across the riverbed, was lucky to walk away without injury. I felt that one. I think he did too. Greasy little rocks and the only little tiny bit of water up for grabs on the circuit. As the riders closed in towards the end of the laps, already the leader had come through. Remember, this was going to be a 5-lapper race. Hydration was key. It was a short pit as well, so if the rider was close behind, you'd be able to look across and check him out. 2 KZN kids were running 1 and 2 at the moment. Brett Swanepoel, leader in the overalls and leading in the OR2s. Second on the road and leading in the OR3s was Brad Cox. Cox was trying to see what he could do. Calvin Hume rolled in not far behind him as well. So Hume was building pace as the race got more familiar for him. Remember, he is generally a rock hopper. Dav Cocker looked a little bit on the back foot, unable to run the exact pace as Cox this time around. Shake of the head shows that something was not lacquer, as they say. Check out the fast spanners in the KTM squad though, as Jazz Kutsia came in. A fast fuel and air filter change, making sure the thing was breathing smooth, clean air. Big hydration coming in for Jazz. Just not able to get on that exact pace as Brett Swanepoel, and it was to be expected that Swanepoel was going to be a ripper down here. Just used to running this slightly different kind of funky terrain down in KZN. Kenny also looked slightly out of puff as he was in the dust as well, regretting not pushing harder in the time trial and having to line up 9th in the queue, sucking a lot of dust in the early laps. He was still sitting second, though, in the Big Banger class. Kenny obviously had an absolute perler of lap number 1. Remember, the fight was going to be between the 2 red plates of Moore and the former champion Gilbert. Gilbert's taken a couple of championships. Moore has yet to get his big number 1 plate. That was JC Nienaber trying to hang on to the lead for his 3rd place battle, and a 450 going up against a 125. Dylan Cox was still leading for the RBS Yamaha squad as the Husqvarna of Wilson was closing him down. Blau was in sublime form once again, out-qualifying absolutely everyone out there. Farmer had gone back to his 300. Remember at the Rhino Park round, Farmer was on the big 450 that didn't really gel with his style. He was back on the old dog, the 300 smoker, and looked much more comfortable going into this event. The open terrain was misleading. If it was open, it meant you were doing big descents and big climbs. And if you went into some of that old sugarcane, there was zero grip. A couple of riders learning that the hard way. Kochi was down there as well, trying to see what he could do in the battle for the senior championship, but these descents catching a couple of riders out. Remember, it is totally different terrain in KZN than we race around the rest of South Africa and the racing regions, especially the hard pack of Gauteng, where it's pretty much switching between 5th and 6th gear the whole way through. This terrain was a mixture of 3rd and 4th, and sometimes 2nd when you had to hit some of the big climbs. The riders making mincemeat of the technical sections, but even Brett Swanepoel, the great Brett Swanepoel, showing that he wasn't infallible. He was making a couple of mistakes in the rocks, trying to find some sweet lines to try and climb the way through. Remember, Brett races on the cross-country and the Enduro Championship, as does this man, Brad Cox. And I think that mixture of racing the high speed and the technical has played into their hands and shown what they can do. And that's why they were running light years ahead of the rest of the field. Similar scenario for Calvin Hume, although he'd been a little bit stretched on the high speed stuff. For Dav Cocker, this would have been a big test for him. Remember, he's a motocross crossover kid, so he's good at pinning it wide open, but those little legs on the tech hold him back a little bit. On lap number 2, Jared Kutsia looked like he was starting to come to life and close in on the bikes ahead of him. Same story for Kenny Gilbert. He was fine in the groove. And this old school kind of terrain was playing into his hands. It was now a big dice as well, because no one wanted to give away the championship points lead. This was round 3 of the championship, meaning it was the tiebreaker. In the 125 high scores at this point, Matty Wilson had got himself into the lead of the 125s as he stayed ahead of Taki Bodgiorgis, while we went a little bit further down the hill to see a very rare mistake from the almost unstoppable Wade Blau in the seniors. He was still in the lead though. On the second loop, that was a massive climb. Unfortunately, the camera just doesn't tell the tale. Maybe the body language of Cox will though. Having to hang it all off the back, get that traction down, working hard to get the power down on the back wheel for the 250. 1, 2, and 3 at this stage were Swanee, Cox, and Cocker. Calvin Hume got his fueling strategy a little bit off and had to walk it all the way back in. He'd have lost a ton of time there. And at the end of day number 1, it was Swanepoel at the top of the charts. That meant there was 1 red plate going into the final round. He had the advantage over Jazz Kutsia. Not just that, he had won his category as well as the overall. Along with taking a huge crash, Cox followed him in for the number 2.
Very tough day. So I think tomorrow's going to be even tougher. Track's quite roughed out now, and yeah, we're just going to have to try and recover tonight and push hard for tomorrow.
Was the injury going to be a factor for day 2?
Quite a fast section. I tapped front brakes and I washed the front. Landed on my arm, and literally from there it was just, yeah, really sore in that. So I bumped it a few times and that didn't help it either, but yeah, we'll make it better for tomorrow.
Welcome back to Middelovo in KZN, the Virginia Trails, on a farm that's been in the same family for over 140 years. This was going to be the scene where we would decide the championship for 2020. Brett Swanepoel was in great form, even though he'd lost around about a pint of blood on day number 1, but still managed to take the overall and the outright lead in his category. Everyone now was biting their fingernails. The one man that was a no-show, though, in the queue was Kenny Gilbert. He'd had a massive crash, already injuring a broken elbow, and he was a no-show, meaning he was out of the championship. So it was up to Charon Moore to simply bring it home to nail down his first ever national number 1 plate. A much earlier start this time around, so it was going to be cooler running and 1 lap less than the previous day, as the day simply ran too long and the riders were more than fatigued. Brett Swanepoel knew exactly what he had to do. He was going to go off and simply chase into the wind, the exact same track and layout. And in the post-race interview after day number 1, Swanepoel saying, "It may not run faster, it'll be more familiar for sure, but it may not run faster. It is chopped up and whooped up after 5 laps of racing for all of our national championship runners." Cox was in the 2 spot, and Cocker was in 3rd. He would do what he could, but mathematically it was impossible. He was realistically looking at a number 2 for the championship. Charon Moore was in the sweet spot, but if he felt pressure at the beginning of the season when he signed his factory deal, now it was pressure plus VAT. He had to finish this race to nail down his number 1 plate. It was all his to lose at this point. Same situation for Brett Swanepoel, but as he proved on the first day in the Virginia Trails, he wasn't making any mistakes. Even when he made a crash, he was still able to take the win. Brad Cox was looking like he was going to be able to run away with it. Today, it looked like Dav Cocker may have had his match, but he was not going to be able to close things down. Jared Kutsia had a much better day on day number 2. Certainly it started off better, but it was going to be a gnarly one. The Pepson Plastic squad just making some marks on the climbs as they walked around out there on the trails. Not taking any risks today, Moore knew exactly what he had to do. Simply bring it home for the finish. For Coley, it was all about getting some glory in the final racing laps of the championship season. He was out of the championship running, having missed 1 or 2 rounds, but he was going to have to just see if he could take the final bit of glory. Dav Cocker gave us and everyone out there a little bit of a heart attack. This section was known as Pikes Peak. If you dropped off the other side of that, you would know about it. It would be more than a rebuild on the bike, put it that way. Ryan Peltzer was doing what he could. He actually enjoyed the trails, he said, just couldn't run the pace of the top 2 out front. Already now climbing up inside of the top 10 overall was the top 125, as Jared Kutsia almost followed suit in the wheel tracks of Cocker. The riders were starting to push the limits as the track had now chewed up. Remember, they'd have hit that climb 5 times the previous day. and it would have offered a little bit more traction in the previous day. Now overnight, dusted up, and again, no rain to try and calm the track down. But familiarity breeds speed, and all riders were running a little bit faster. Unfortunately, no time to look around and enjoy the amazing terrain. Sugarcane on your left, gorges and woods on your right-hand side, and the drone giving us some up-close and personal footage. That was Wade Blau that just popped out. He had no one to play with today, and pretty much the whole way through the championship season. He was eyeing up his first big number one plate for the Roos KTM squad. Wilson also was on the verge of walking away with his big number one plate, his first ever in his second time of running in the high school 125s, and he needed to do it as well because he'd already said that he was jumping out to the 250s in 2021. For Brett Swanepoel and Cox, they were just enjoying the trails and dominating out front, very closely matched on lap times as well, even though they were running on a 350 Husky and a 250 KTM respectively. The second of the 250s and third overall was Dav Cocker, who just knew he wasn't going to be able to get onto the wheel tracks of Cox based on the lap times and the running of the previous day. Same situation for Jazz Kutsia. The Forest that had looked prime and offered tons of traction on the previous day's running was now chewed up, whooped out and blown out, with a couple more rocks starting to show and rear their heads on the big descents. With a background in multi-racing, Swanepoel and Cox were just untouchable on all assets and facets of the terrain. Marco Cocci was trying to chase down a top 3 run in the seniors. He was dicing it out with Hunter Simon for the championship, and Pepper looked like he had a much better run of it at the final round, trying to chase the numbers in the Masters category as well. Dav Cocker showing us how it's done on the big descents, and Jazz looking like he was going to take another number 2 plate going forward into the next season. He was desperate to get that number 1. Remember, he has tasted victory in the past. He has taken championships, but this time around, just getting beaten on the final day of running. That looked like it was Big D Gray out there racing in the regionals. For Charon Moore, even though he was out of the running for the top 5, he was still light years ahead of the rest of the field in the Big Bagger OR1s and ahead of one of the locals who really knew these trails like the back of his hand. That was Cole. Remember, he's a former champion in the OR2 category. Palzer was on song as well. Looked like he was going to cement his number 3 spot in the championship. As we go on board and check out the drone footage courtesy of Warren Burton as we fly over Peter Steinbank's farm. On the descent, Matty Wilson was not only inside of the top 10 overall, but was starting to build pace. Warren Burton's drone footage showing us JC Nienaber and Ian Rawle battling through the rocks, but down in the forest, a 125 high schooler was in big trouble. We caught up with the RBS Yamaha of Cox.
My bike just seized. I'll change the plug-in check.
Remember, Dylan Cox won round number 1, but since then it's been the Matty Wilson show. It looks like it was the end of the championship charge for the local rider. Wilson was going to have no one to play with in the late laps, meaning that he was one step closer to his big national number 1 plate. The track was chewing up and the lap times were getting faster and faster for all riders concerned. And weren't they happy that the laps had been trimmed by 1 in the overnight? The organisation committee from KZN making a good choice to try and trim it back and start the race a little bit earlier on the final day to try and avoid that midday heat, which on day number 1 was climbing into the late 30s. Pepper was still out there trying to bag his points for the Masters Championship as we closed in on the end of this amazing event. Brett Swanepoel went 2 for 2 on the championship, saw the checkers twice in 2 days of racing, and was the champ.
Yeah, for sure. I had a really good day. Yesterday I felt a bit blown at the end of the day, and today I was actually a bit worried. But going today, I just found a good rhythm and felt like I could really push it and actually enjoyed the race the whole day. So yeah, the team did an awesome job. The bike was good. We all worked well together. TBR did a great job helping me do a few settings after yesterday. So yeah, we just really had a good day and can't be happier.
The flags were flying. Jazz Kutsia came in after carrying all that awesome momentum forward from Rhino Park, but in KZN he had to settle for 2 spots and the 2 spot in the championship. For Brad Cox, he was in sublime form in KZN. No one was getting near him. 3rd overall and a big number 1 plate for the champion.
Stoked, back to back. Couldn't ask for a better weekend.
yeah, they haven't made it hard on me this weekend, but yeah, managed to come out on top, and yeah, super happy. Another championship to the books, so can't complain. Huge ups to my team, brother Leader Tread, KDM, my family, my girlfriend, my brother, Shandor, Kev, all of the guys. Thank you so much.
Standout ride for the local who had to push his bike across the line on day number 1. Calvin Hume walked away with an amazing top 5. But the big story was in the Big Banger OR1s. After years of trying, the big number 1 plate finally goes to Sharon Moore. What a way to pay back KTM for their faith, signing him at the beginning of the season.
It's honestly an unbelievable experience. I mean, I grew up racing, driving here. We past Eston, where the sugar belt was for many years, and I remember being a kid there, getting like lost in the racing, and to be here standing with this number 1 plate, it honestly feels surreal, and it feels like a dream come true. Like all the guys I looked up to as a kid, and finally get to tick that box. So it's such a great feeling.
Looking at the rest of the categories, Blau taking another win, undefeated on the championship, nails down the seniors number 1 plate for the first time for him. And in the high schools, Matty Wilson, number 1.
Yes, no, today went very well, much better than yesterday. Surprisingly, it was more energized road, better, faster laps, well, more consistent laps. But yeah, I just want to say thank you to MCA and Husqvarna for the perfect bike and for the perfect season. Couldn't ask for much more.
Yeah, man, it's a long time coming, and I'm glad I've eventually pulled it off. But I had good support today and great stuff from the roof. The roof guys have really helped me a lot, and KTM. So thanks very much to everyone.
And in the Masters category, a master stroke for the multiple champion Wayne Farmer, going back to the smoker.
Pretty excited, after this year, what we've all gone through, to come back and get racing going number 1 was pretty cool. But to take another championship, yeah, it's been a good year. Been in a lot of pain with my back this year, but so we're fighting and we've done it.
And here's confirmation of your champions for 2020 in the OR1 Big Bangers. Sharon Moore beating out Ninaber and Delport. Brett Swanepoel, your champ once again in the OR2s, ahead of Kutsia and Ian Rawls, squeaking it into 3rd place. For the OR3s, the season has been about 2 riders. This time, Brad Cox ends off on 97, 4 points ahead of Cocker, and then Pelzer in 3rd. Matty Wilson wins out in the high schools. Dylan Cox problems, dropping him down to 3rd, and Swanepoel jumped up to 2nd. Then in the seniors, Wade Blau on 100, the perfect score, ahead of Marco Cocci in 2nd and Hannes Simon in 3rd. And for the Masters, Farmer, the champ, ahead of Poole and Pepper. All of this South African cross-country racing action was proudly brought to you by Pepson Plastics in association with Yamaha, KTM, and Husqvarna Motorcycles.